I1. So today we're going to have a look at adverbial clauses with after, before, when and while. Alright. An adverbial phrase can begin with after, before, when or while. If so, it will be followed by a present participle. So you know the present participle means the ing form of the verb instead of a finite verb. Let's have a look at the examples. He felt revitalized after going for a break. After going for a break. He felt revitalized after went for a break. Now this is wrong because went is a finite verb. So you can't have a finite verb if your adverbial clause is going to begin with after, before, when or while. It has to be followed by a present participle verb. Right? The next one. An adverbial phrase beginning with when can be followed by a past participle, but the same does not apply for after, before or while. Now that's something that you need to remember. The little boy cried when punched by his sister. Now if you can see here, the adverbial clause begins with when. So here you can see that the adverbial clause begins with when. When the adverbial clause begins with when, then it can be followed by a past participle, right? But that cannot happen for after, before and while. So the little boy cried when punched by his sister. The little boy cried while punched by his sister can't, because you can see here it's while and after that you can't have it. The little boy was crying while being punched by his sister. That is also fine. Okay, correct. While being punched, okay. The little boy cried after punched. You can't have after and then the past participle. Here you have while, but you have that along with the little boy was crying while being punched. So then it is okay. So what you need to remember is that an adverbial clause beginning with when can be followed by a past participle, but the same does not apply for after, before or while, okay? You can't have straight away the past participle, okay? But being punched, yes, okay? Next one, again you have it along with being. The little boy cried after being punched. Correct. The little boy was already crying before punched. Wrong. It can't be followed by that. Okay. The little boy was already crying before being punched. Perfect. Right. So you've got to remember the rules. The next one. An adverbial phrase beginning with when can be followed by a past participle only in a passive structure. Plants thrive when grown by loving hands. I went away when grown tired of waiting. Now, what is wrong here? When an adverbial phrase is beginning with when, it can be followed by a past participle, but that is only in a passive structure. So, if you say the plants thrive when grown by loving hands, right? You know that this sentence is a passive structure. Now, I'm not going to go back into active passive because we've already done that lesson. So, plants thrive when grown by loving hands. We know that this structure is passive. Then, after when, it can be followed by a verb which is the past participle form. However, I went away when grown tired of waiting. Now, this is not a passive structure. Therefore, after when, it cannot be followed by a past participle. So, it is wrong. Moving on. An adverbial phrase beginning with after, before, when or while usually indicates time. It's not always, but it's the usual norm. When did she feel anxious? After, before, when, while making the statement. He felt anxious after making the statement. He felt anxious before making the statement. He felt anxious when making the statement. He felt anxious while making the statement. Right? So, if you can see here, an adverbial phrase beginning with after, before, when or while, this usually indicates a time frame. Okay? And the question is, when did she feel anxious, right? Or when did he feel anxious? Right? So, I think it would be he rather. When did he feel anxious? It is after, before, when or while the statement. So, if you put she here, then of course you have to change this to she, right? So, she felt anxious after, before, when, while, making the statement. Okay, so we see here it's he felt anxious. If it is when did she feel anxious, she felt anxious before, after, when, while making the statement. Alright, find out why B is correct and why is A wrong, right? They take off their hats before enter the church. They take off their hats before entering the church. So, what is the rule? When an adverbial phrase is beginning with after, before, when or while, it is followed by a present participle instead of a finite verb. So here, they take off their hats before entering. So it's followed by a present participle verb. So therefore, this is correct and this is wrong. Next rule. Why is 2B correct? Why is 2A wrong? He regained consciousness while taking to the hospital. He regained consciousness while being taken to the hospital. So remember, being taken, I said it is possible, right? But can you have a past participle followed? After a while, can you have the past participle here? No. Remember, only when you have when that can happen, right? If there is while, it cannot follow by a past participle, but while being taken, yes, we said that is possible, right? So that is fine. Underline the adverbial phrases showing time. So you have to first read the sentence and understand it, and then think, okay, which part is showing me the time? Is the adverbial phrase showing me the time? Then tick it, okay? She is quite calm when placed in a difficult situation. When is she calm? When placed in a difficult situation. They went into hiding after inciting the people to rebel. Third one, the files must be rechecked before being handed in. He was singing loudly while sweeping the bedroom. She began to advise me after listening to my issues. Mum must be careful when dealing with strangers. He checked my bank balance before writing the check. I kept smiling into the camera while being questioned. The gentlest creature can be vicious when cornered. My father was very healthy after having his appendix removed. Right, now what are we supposed to do here? Now I've underlined the adverbial clause. What are you supposed to do here? Underline the adverbial phrases showing time. Now coming back here, so when doing so, what is the question that you need to answer? When? Okay, when will answer your timeline. Okay, so she is quite calm when placed in a different situation. They went into the hiding place when? After inciting the people to rebel. The files must be rechecked when? Before being handed in. He was singing loudly when? While sweeping the bedroom. She began to advise me when? After listening to my issues. Mum must be careful when dealing with strangers. He checked my bank balance when? Before writing the check. I kept smiling into the camera when? While being questioned. The gentlest creatures can be vicious when? Cornered. Now, I'm answering the question when. You need to think about, does it talk about a timeline? Okay, so think for yourself. My father was very healthy when? After having his appendix removed. Right, so when you answer yourself the question when, right, I think that will answer the bit that I have actually underlined. Okay, so if you have a look at what is the adverbial phrase showing the time, each of these adverbial phrases that I have underlined shows the exact timeline. Right, so having a look at the next activity, circle the letters of the correct sentence or sentences, right? The woman was crying softly while untied by her rescuers. Now remember, when can you use the past participle? The woman tried to stand up when untied by her rescuers. The woman was crying softly while being untied by her rescuers. So I think when you say when, you can use the past participle followed by it. That's fine. But can you use it when talking with while? No. While being untied, yes, you can do that. That's fine. So therefore, the correct ones are B and C. Now have a look at the other sentences the same way. They counted the boxes before loading them. They counted the boxes after loading them. They counted the boxes after loaded them. What is the rule? Okay, can you remember? The rule was, if your adverbial clause is beginning or phrase is beginning with before, after, when or while, it should be followed by a present participle verb and not the finite verb. So therefore, we can't use loaded because it is a past participle one. Same way, we can't use it. We can only use it with the present participle. So A and B are correct. The next one. The mirror looked so small when hung in the bathroom. He didn't like the mirror when hung in his bathroom. He didn't like the mirror after hanging it in his bathroom. So if you have a look at the rule, when you use when in your adverbial clause, it can be followed by a past participle, right? But that cannot happen along with after, before or while. So after, it could come with the present participle. So C is fine. The mirror looked too small when hung in the bathroom. Okay. He didn't like the mirror when hung it in his bathroom. He didn't like the mirror when hung it in his bathroom. I think that is grammatically incorrect. So you don't say he didn't like the mirror when hung it in his bathroom. So you don't need that part. So that would be incorrect. You could say he didn't like the mirror when hung in his bathroom. Right? So you don't need to say it there. But the mirror looked too small when hung in the bathroom. Oh, I think the T is missing. So let's just put the T there. When hung in the bathroom. Okay. So A and C are correct. He hesitated for some time before knock on the window. He hesitated for some time before knocking on the window. He looked around nervously while knocking on the window. So before knock we can't use. It has to be in the present participle verb form. So therefore, before knocking, while knocking, fine. So we could have a look at the answers as B and C. Fifth one. The clarinet sounds horrible when blown by a beginner. She looked at the audience before blown the clarinet. She looked at the audience before blowing the clarinet. So when you're using when, it could be followed by a past participle. So the clarinet sounds horrible when blown by a beginner is fine. Correct. Cannot be followed by a past participle, so wrong. Can be followed by a present participle, so correct. So the answers are A and C. Right, so I hope you understand the rules now. How do you select if this is right or wrong? Always review with the rules that have been taught to you, right? Next one, rearrange the words to complete the sentences, right? Now here you have some sentences. You need to make sure that you put the remaining bit in the proper order. We've done a few like this when we did our previous lessons. He listened to the audio thrice, attempting before it summarized too. A gift is cherished, given fondness true when with. He sighed satisfyingly, having his massaged feet while. She was weary after toddler's energetic playing too with. You must be careful buying laptop used when. They need to consider agreeing before duties except these two. Alright, so please pause the video here and take some time, okay? Go back and pause the video and rearrange the words and write it properly so that when I'm writing the answers, you could have a look at it and tick it, and if there are any mistakes, then you could correct yourself. Alright, so hopefully you've completed it by now. Let us have a look at the answers together. The first one. He listened to the audio thrice before attempting to summarize it. Second one, a gift is cherished when given with true fondness. Third one, he sighed satisfyingly He sighed satisfyingly while having his feet massaged. The next one, question number 4. She was weary after playing with two energetic toddlers. Question number 5. You must be careful when buying used laptop. And the last one, they need to consider before agreeing to accept. They need to consider before agreeing to accept these duties. So hopefully now you've got the answers right, and make sure that you understand the main clause is before the adverbial clauses, right? And after that you have your adverbial clause, obviously, right? So if before the adverbial clause you have the main clause, then after the main clause is when you have the adverbial clause. Right, so let us have a look at the next one. Fill in the blanks with suitable words in the box. So here in the box, you've got some words. Approved, being approved, are torn, torn, being extrayed, extrayed, call, calling, hearing, were hearing, identify, identifying, learning, learnt, seen, sees, skating, was skating, worry, worrying. So while I'm reading you the sentences, try to fill in the gaps, right? He administered first aid to the victim before what? An ambulance. He was quivering with fear while blank. Poverty is tolerable when blank as a challenge. He worked out a strategy after blank are aims. Amy always feels contented while blank on ice. My father is grumpy when blank about something. Now the words are the same as in the previous slide, right? Monica traveled to many countries after blank several languages. Movies are categorized before blank for public viewing. People usually do nothing when blank between two obligations. We were persuaded after blank eyewitness accounts. Right, so I hope you've completed it by now. Let's have a look at the answers. He administered first aid to the victim before calling. Before calling. An ambulance. He was quivering with fear while being extrayed. Poverty is tolerable when seen as a challenge. We worked out a strategy after identifying our aims. Amy always feels contented while skating on ice. Right? Let's have a look at the next bit. Let's have a look at number 6. My father is grumpy when worrying about something. Monica traveled to many countries after learning several languages. Movies are categorized before being approved for public. People usually do nothing when torn between two obligations. And the last one, we were persuaded after hearing. Right. So I think we've got all the words there, right? We've completed the gaps. Have a look at it. Now, when we come to the first one, before is there, right? So now the first thing that you need to do is obviously understand what the sentence is and pick and choose the correct meaning of the word. It could be call or calling, right? Why can't we use call? Because when you're writing your adverbial clause, if it is beginning with if, and when you have when, while, after, before, it should be followed by a present participle. So therefore, once you identify call or calling, which one do you pick? Calling. Right? So that's how I've done all the others. So please have a look at it and see if you've got the rule correctly here. The second one, he was quivering with fear while being x-rayed. So if you have while being x-rayed is fine. Remember, we had a look at it in the examples. Poverty is tolerable when seen. If you have when, and your adverbial clause is beginning with when, it could be followed by a past participle. We worked out a strategy after identifying our aims. So it belongs to the first rule that we learned. If your adverbial clause or phrase is beginning with after, before, when or while, it could be followed by a present participle instead of a finite verb. So for the fifth one, that is this rule again, okay, it still remains the same. My father is grumpy when worrying about something. The rule is the same. Monica traveled to many countries after learning. So it's the first rule that we studied, before being approved. So being is fine, you can use it. When torn, when you have when, it could be followed by a past participle. After is followed by a present participle. So it is correct. Alright, so moving on, rewrite the sentences correctly. They relaxed after putting their tents in the forest. She can rest after she did a great job. My friends attended a science course before sent abroad. An injury is upsetting when inflicted by a pet. They relaxed after putting up their tents in a clearing. People frequently disclose the truth when taken by surprise. So what you have to do, rewrite these sentences correctly. So as I always tell you, pause the video and do it on your own. And then let's have a look at the answers together. Let's have a look at the answers. The first one. They relaxed after. Can you say put up? You can't, because it has to be followed by a present participle. So therefore, putting up their tents in the forest. Second one, she can rest after doing a great job. Again, same rule. Third one, my friends attended a science course before being sent abroad. The fourth one, an injury is upsetting when inflicted by a pet. Fifth one, they relaxed after putting up their tents in a clearing. Let's have a look at it. People frequently disclose the truth when taken by surprise. Alright, so here are the answers, right? They relaxed after put up. So as I told you, you can't use put up, it has to be in the present participle form, right? She can rest after doing. Again, it has to be followed by the present participle. My friends attended a science course before being sent. Okay. Next one. An injury is upsetting when inflicted. So that's fine because when could be followed by a past participle, right? They relaxed after putting up. People frequently disclose the truth when taken. Again, you could have a past participle after when. So that is fine again. Let's have a look at our last activity. Rewrite the paragraph. Change each underlined sentence into an adverbial phrase beginning with the word in brackets. Then join the adverbial phrase to the sentence before it. So you've got to do a lot of things. First one is change the underlined sentence into an adverbial phrase beginning with the word in the brackets. Then you have to join that adverbial phrase to the sentence before it. I spoke only a few words of English. I attended an English speaking school before. So you have to now use before. So I spoke only a few words of English before. Then can you say I attended? No. Then what is the change you have to do? So let me read it through. Slowly, let's do it together after that. I spoke only a few words of English. I attended an English speaking school. I began to fear English language. I got low marks in the subject throughout the first term. I think it should be I began to fear the English language. Okay, let's put the English language. I got low marks in the subject throughout the first term. Then I discovered a new word. I was visiting an uncle during the holidays. I got to know and like the English language. I was introduced to Grimm's fairy tales in my uncle's library. English became my friend. It had been my dreaded enemy. Moreover, since then, I've been able to turn to books. I need relaxation or knowledge. Now, think about how you could rewrite this. Please bear in mind that this is an extract from Grammar Builder. Now, let us start writing it, okay? I spoke only a few words of English. I spoke only a few words of English. Then what should you have? This, before, right? Before then the remaining bit, attending an English speaking school. Attending English speaking school. The next one, I began to fear the English language. Right? After, now the word has to come, okay? After, then what should it be followed by? A present participle. After getting low marks in the subject after getting low marks in the subject throughout the first term. Then let's have a look at this next sentence. Then I discovered a new world. New world. While visiting an uncle during the holidays. While visiting an uncle during the holidays. The next one. I got to know and like the English language. I got to know and like the English language when introduced to. When introduced to. What was it? Grimm's fairy tales in my uncle's library, right? Grimm's fairy tales in my uncle's library, right? English became my friend. English became my friend, right? My friend after having been my dreaded enemy. After having been my dreaded enemy. Next one. Moreover, since then, moreover, since then, I've been able to turn to books. I've been able to turn to books when needing relaxation or knowledge. When needing relaxation or knowledge. Right, here is our paragraph, right? I spoke only a few words of English before attending an English-speaking school. I began to fear the English language after getting low marks in the subject throughout the first term. Then I discovered a new world while visiting an uncle during the holidays. I got to know and like the English language when introduced to Grimm's fairy tales in my uncle's library. English became my friend after having been my dreaded enemy. Moreover, since then, I've been able to turn to books when needing relaxation or knowledge. So I think now you understand when and how to use after, before, when and while. But before we round off, let us go through the rules one more time so that in case you couldn't understand why it was the answer, you'll be able to get it through with this. When an adverbial phrase begins with after, before, when or while, it is followed by a present participle instead of a finite verb. That was the first rule that we learnt. The second one, an adverbial phrase beginning with when can be followed by a past participle, but it does not apply for after, before and while. So here we had a look at an example, but remember, after being punched is fine, before being punched is fine, while being punched is also fine. Right? And then we had a look at this part where an adverbial phrase beginning with after, before, when or while usually indicates time. So when you ask yourself the question when, right, it answers that question. So when did he feel anxious? He felt anxious before, after, when, while making the statement, right? Or if you say, when did she feel anxious? Before making the statement, after making the statement, when making the statement, while making the statement. Now, why is this lesson very important? Now, when you're doing your writing task 1, it could be writing task 2, it is very important that you use these words, right? And if you're writing maybe a process, or if you're writing a letter, right? If you're writing an essay, it comes quite in handy to use these adverbial clauses. And when you do so, I see most students make a lot of errors because they don't know the proper structure and they don't know how and where to use it. So I think now all of you who followed this lesson knows exactly what is the proper structure, how do you write it properly. So with that, we come to the end of the lesson, adverbial clauses.